Hello, Facebook. This is Brittany Boles, early this week with another chapter of my book, Finding Starlight. This is the true story of my life as I remember it, a tale of overcoming trauma and discovering magic in the world. It's told through the lens of a past life regression session that really happened here in New Hampshire. And some of the names have been changed for various reasons, but in general, this is the true story of my life as I remember it. I'm reading it one chapter, 1 week at a time to the internet at large until I get discovered or until I sign an agent. So if you're just joining me, we are just passing the halfway mark. This is chapter 16. The full book is 30 chapters. So here we go. As always, trigger warnings. Be mindful of your own triggers and traumas. And if you want to reach out to me to share your story or just talk in general, you're always welcome to comment or to DM me. It means a lot to me to know who you all are that are watching. So thank you for joining me early this week. Usually we go live on Wednesdays. Today is Monday because I'm traveling. Here we go. Chapter 16 of Finding Starlight by me, Brittany Boles. The Blaire Witch. The cloud cleared and turned gray like a dreary day. I wondered if it was feeling my sadness. To Katrina, I said, "Dad really did write me off. He disowned me. Amber told me he wouldn't even say my name or let anyone else in the house talk about me. I was banned from any contact with her, so we had to sneak around. I would visit her at school when I could. I went to her band concerts, since Dad never did. It was awful. I felt like I betrayed her." "It seemed like you did what you thought you had to do," Katrina answered. "And it seems like your sister understood, right?" "She put on a strong face when I came around," I said, "but she was hurting. It took a long time for us to repair our relationship. I don't think I'll ever understand the extent of the hurt I caused. I'm not sure we were ever the same after I left." I wanted to burst into tears just thinking about it. "Where did you go when you left your dad's house?" Katrina asked. "Well, that's sort of the beginning of another bad story," I said, abashed. It had been many years since I felt this badly for myself, and I did not like reliving the pity party. "Can a story truly be bad?" Katrina invited me to follow along. "Or are stories simply that, stories we tell ourselves? We get to tell the story. It happened to us, and we can view it any way we choose. We carry these stories along with us like baggage, awards, feathers in our caps, or what have you. We decide which stories will define us. We decide what story we want to tell the world about ourselves. We replay certain stories in our heads over and over again." "That's a good point," I said. "And it's true that some of the things I thought hurt me or made me weak were actually some of my greatest moments. There were opportunities for me to grow, learn something important, or choose which path I would take." "Very wise," Katrina said. "Very wise indeed. So, tell me your story. However you'd like. The story of what happened when you grew up and moved out of your dad's home." I took yet another deep breath and prepared to relay the tale of my utmost foolishness to this fairy in a way that I hoped would be inspiring. Yeah, I thought, this is going to suck. Out loud, I said, "In a way, it's the story of how I lost my fortune. I was only able to leave home because I was confident that my future was taken care of financially. I got my first payout for my father's death when I turned 18. which was in December of my senior year of high school. I moved in with friends and I made some poor choices. I experimented more with sex and drugs and drank a lot. After I lost my virginity and walked away from the church, I decided to play it loose and fast. I was going to take back my sexuality by having as much sex as I wanted with whoever I could find. Katrina interrupted. That happens to a lot of young women who have experienced trauma. How did it work out for you? Were you as empowered as you hoped? Not even kind of, I replied. It's not something I'm proud of, but it happened. I mean, aside from being promiscuous, I didn't do anything overly crazy. I still went to school and got good grades and everything. I had already been accepted to a really good college in Malibu, so I wasn't worried about much at that point. But my antics did catch the school's attention. They put me in touch with my vice principal. She was young and cool, in her early 30s at the time. Her name was Blaire. She took a sudden interest in me, decided she was my mentor. A few months before I was supposed to graduate, a close friend of mine died in a car crash. It was a huge shock to our community, and we were all struggling. At just about that same time, I got sick. Because of the circumstances, the doctor said I must be suffering from stress and anxiety. They couldn't seem to figure out why I was in so much pain, nauseous, losing weight, breathless, other than anxiety. During that time, Blaire invited me into her home to be sort of a daughter figure. At first, it seemed sweet. She had a big house to herself with a golden retriever named Murphy. To me, it seemed like she had the best life, all the freedom in the world. It seemed like she was just trying to help me get back on my feet, to take care of me. I appreciated it, and her, a lot. Everyone thought it was weird, though, me living with the vice principal, but she insisted it was fine. It was an actual thing that people talked about. I didn't care because, meanwhile, I just kept getting sicker and sicker. They still couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, and I wasn't getting any better. It finally turned out that I had pneumonia, which, because of how long it went undiagnosed, had turned into some rare complication. I'll never forget how terrifying it was the night my lung collapsed. Blaire and I were eating and drinking at the bar. I had a fake ID. And suddenly I just doubled over and clutched my side. I could hardly breathe. I told her that it felt like an explosion had just happened inside of me. And she talked me into waiting it out until my scheduled MRI the next morning. The doctors got me ready and put me in the machine that next day, but my lips were blue, and I could hardly even talk at that point. I was so weak. They pulled me out of the machine within minutes and rushed me onto an ambulance. Later, they said that not only had one of my lungs collapsed, but also my organs were shutting down, preparing to die. The ambulance rushed me to the hospital, where I had to have an emergency surgery. After that, I was still in critical condition and had to spend an entire week in the ICU, then another week in the hospital. A sharp intake of breath from Katrina threw off my rhythm. I forgot how serious it all sounded. At the time, I was so out of it that I hardly even noticed. She asked, "Did your dad and Jane come visit you? Did they know this was going on?" I looked down at the forest floor, covered in moss. "They didn't come, did they?" she answered herself. I shook my head. "Jane sneaked Amber out of the house to let her come and visit me once, for a few minutes," I said. "Jane didn't come in, and Amber only stayed for a little while. I was drugged up on morphine and hardly even there. The doctors said I nearly died. They said my organs were shutting down, and if I hadn't been rushed to the hospital that day, it would have been over. I didn't feel the need to share that information with my sister. Dad and Jane never asked. When I got out, I was on bed rest for a month. I couldn't eat. I was on serious medications. The whole thing is foggy to me, even now. I remember just laying in bed day after day in Blaire's house. I became isolated. I couldn't go to school, and since I had moved out, Dad had cut me off from all communication with anyone in his house, including Amber. I lost my friends. I was completely dependent on Blaire, I explained. What about your aunt and uncle in Arizona? Katrina asked, like she was desperately trying to find a solution to my long-ago problem. We had drifted apart by then, too, I answered. The last time I went down there was the summer my mom died, and even though we stayed in touch over the phone afterward, life just sort of took us apart. They ended up adopting their son's daughter and having to be full-time parents again, which I think was a big factor. And I was off doing my own thing, being crazy, and then living with Blaire. I see, Katrina said. You really were isolated, she added. I nodded and continued. When I finally started getting better, Blaire took me under her wing as a sidekick. I can't explain it better than that, really. Sometimes she referred to me as her daughter, if it suited her. Other times, her sister or her friend. She talked me into dyeing my hair blonde like hers, wearing high heels and tons of makeup, and acting completely differently. That's when things started getting strange. She helped me get that fake ID so I could go out drinking with her and her friends. She gave me a bright red Camaro convertible she said was a gift from one of her ex-boyfriends. She introduced me to her family like I was her newfound daughter. But then we'd go out drinking and she'd try to get me to hook up with these men who were in their 20s and 30s. We smoked cigarettes despite my near-death experience. Her family was strangely regular, and her sister had me babysit her kids. When we smelled like smoke, even if I wasn't smoking at the time because it hurt my lungs, Blaire would blame it on me. She very much played two different personas, depending on what setting we were in at the time. She was friends with a professional hockey player, she said, and talked to him on the phone all the time. She told me she was friends with most of the guys on the Minnesota Wild team as well, and would often go out to the city and tell me she had been hanging out at fancy parties with them, though I never got to meet them. I had one friend who was extremely suspicious about this and kept trying to catch Blaire in a lie about it. That was my first inkling that things were off, but I didn't want to believe it. Once, when we were driving up north to visit her family, she was having another long, animated conversation on her cell phone with some hockey player who supposedly kept asking her to marry him. She always said she wasn't interested, but that he wouldn't leave her alone about it. That day, I looked over at her and noticed that her phone didn't have the right screen for a phone call. It was just locked, like she was holding it up to her ear and talking to nobody. I don't know why, but I didn't say anything. I told myself I must be imagining things and let it continue like all was well. I was so far out of my element at that point, I didn't want to make any waves. What? Katrina asked, getting visibly uncomfortable. She said, what? Oh, you just wait, I answered. It gets way worse. She told me she was also a model who had photo shoots in Miami. Specifically, she said she was a wedding dress model for Vera Wang. It was an oddly glamorous and mysterious life she apparently led. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Other than the hockey player thing, maybe, which just seemed too outlandish to be a lie. So anyway, she and I flew out to Miami a few times and stayed in fancy hotels. We usually brought a friend or two, and we were never allowed to go to her shoots because she said security was tight due to a stalker problem. She went into a ton of detail about the stalker situation, saying he followed her all around the country and got arrested multiple times trying to break into her shoots. Again, it was so dramatic and vivid, I couldn't imagine how or why she'd say it if it wasn't true. While she worked, her friends and I went to amusement parks, expensive restaurants, clothing stores. She said we'd be reimbursed for everything because it was a business expense, so we saved our receipts to give to her agency. Once, when we got to our suite, she had received a bouquet of a dozen long-stemmed white roses and a note that read, "Sleep well." She freaked out, saying they must have come from her stalker. The roses had been delivered while we were out of the room. I was suspicious, so I called the florist while Blaire was outside smoking a cigarette. I asked who paid for the flowers, and they said, "We don't know. She paid cash." Blaire walked in on me and realized what I was doing. She ripped the phone out of my hand and slammed it down. I stopped talking for a second because Katrina's expression was just pure horror. Did I think she was her own stalker? I answered, the unasked question on her face. Yeah, I guess I did, at that point. I wanted to trust her, though, and I felt like I was indebted to her, so I didn't press the issue. She could have her secrets, I figured. Things continued like that for a little while, a couple of months anyway. Us partying, spending money, dating people around the same age. I got closer to her family and further from my own. I hardly ever talked to my cousin Nikki anymore. I was so wrapped up in Blaire's life. At the end of the school year, I graduated from high school with honors. My dad, Jane, and Amber were there because my stepsister Heather was graduating too, but none of them acknowledged me. It really felt like it was just me and Blaire against the world at that point. It was fun at first, and she was good to me. Then, after a while, things started to change between us. She became more controlling and emotional. She said she had received bills for my medical treatment when I was sick, and that she had paid them for me. She asked to be reimbursed. Katrina was fully frowning and shaking her head. She knew where this was going. I raised my eyebrows and nodded. Yep, you're right. Later, she said, started having money troubles. She said it was because my medical bills were so high that she had fallen into debt to pay them. She told me we were losing the house and that she couldn't make the car payments. She even had the car that I owned, not the Camaro, repossessed. She didn't even warn me. I just woke up one morning to see a tow truck taking it away. She said it was a better financial decision than continuing to make my payments. One day, our electricity was turned off. Another time, it was the cable. She kept saying it was because of my medical bills, and I believed her. Then, she started getting sick herself. She said she had fibromyalgia, a rare pain disorder that was notoriously difficult to diagnose. Over the next few months, she ended up in 6 different emergency rooms, crying with pain, and wouldn't let me take her home until the doctor had injected and prescribed opiates. She convinced me not to go to college in California. She said Amber was having emotional problems and needed me nearby. She said she needed me too. She took the liberty of submitting an application to a state school on my behalf and urged me to seriously consider going there. I felt like I owed it to her to do so. And she was right about Amber. I didn't want to leave her again, even though I hardly ever got to see her. I enrolled in this state school. It was hugely disappointing. I shoved my entire schedule into a 3-day week so I could drive up to Blaire's house the rest of the time. That lasted exactly 1 semester. When I was home on winter break, she told me that she had found a way for me to sell all my future... When I was home on winter break, she told me she had found a way for me to sell my future annuity payments from my father's death for cash. She said it would be the answer to our money problems. I could pay my remaining medical bills and reimburse her for what she had shouldered, she explained. It made sense and appealed to my guilty conscience, so we went through with the process. It was actually a huge deal, a whole legal proceeding, just to get the money. But we did it, more than once, in that year. Meanwhile, things were getting even stranger. She had a major pain flare-up during that same winter vacation and convinced me to take the next semester off to care for her. She was emotionally unstable and unpredictable and seemed depressed and suicidal. I couldn't leave her. So, there went my college education. I just never went back after Christmas. Katrina's face was a shadowed mix of anger, incredulity, and sadness. I knew the feeling well. This was not a fun story to hear. As if this wasn't enough already, other weird things kept happening to make me suspicious. We'd spend 12 hours at the casino, where she claimed she was counting cards at the blackjack table until all our money was gone. She clearly had a gambling problem, so I would hide money in my boots until we were home. I hate casinos to this day because of her. She told her family she'd adopted me. They seemed perfect. Her parents had both retired from careers in education and were living in a lake house up north. Her sister had 2 kids who became like a niece and nephew to me. We spent a lot of time with them, and I thought they adopted me as Blaire's daughter figure. What was weird was how she constantly lied to them. She was a pack-a-day smoker, yet told them that she didn't smoke at all. Her sister had a nose like a hound and would always accuse me of smoking, even though I had nearly lost my life to pneumonia. I paused, fighting for a second with the truth, and then confessed to Katrina, okay, I had started smoking again after my surgery, thanks to Blaire's constant encouragement, but still, she always let me take the fall. A few times I mentioned our trips to Miami or Blaire's modeling or the famous athlete she talked about to her family. She always shushed me or floated over it like she didn't want them to know. I took it as one of her quirks, but in the back of my mind I started to feel like something was wrong. She constantly lied to her much younger boyfriend and was always trying to set me up with his friends. We went out drinking all the time. Blaire was a good-looking woman who taught me how to flirt, how to dress, how to walk in heels. We turned heads. But keeping up with her was exhausting. From our mini vacations to all-night casino binges, dating drama, and money problems, I hardly had time to decide who I was or what I wanted. I wasn't working, wasn't going to school, and had no stability in my life at all. Katrina was again leaning all the way forward, watching my face with rapt attention. She started to say something just as I did, but motioned for me to go on. Eventually, I started reaching out to old friends and venturing out on my own. I needed some breathing space, and I started by reconnecting with Nikki. I knew I needed more out of my life, and I missed my people. But that did not sit well with Blaire. She went crazy. I realized that she was obsessed with controlling me. One day, after I returned from a party at Nikki's house, Blaire freaked out on me for something. I don't remember what. She was in a bathrobe in the garage, smoking a cigarette, screaming and calling me names. When I tried to calm her down and go inside, she threw her cigarette at me and burned my face. I got past her to the living room, but she grabbed my hair from behind and shoved me over an ottoman. It was every bit as terrifying and dramatic as the fights my mom used to have with her insane boyfriends. That was it for me. I have a rule. You don't get to abuse me. Not even once. She broke it, and I was done. So I left. Katrina looked like she wanted to stand up on her mushroom and cheer. I shook my head as if to say, wait for it. Once I left, people started coming out of the woodwork. They approached me and asked, what happened to your money? Katrina's face said, oh shit. I told them about my medical bills and how Blaire had helped me. People were skeptical. They said I should look into it. I mimed holding a spyglass up to my eye, trying to break the tension. Katrina did not laugh. Dramatically, I said, sure enough, when I did look into it, I realized that she had conned me out of every penny of my inheritance, my savings, my property, and had even ruined my credit by writing bad checks in my name, repossessing vehicles, defaulting on debts. And the worst part is that she tricked me into signing a fake student loan co-signed with her father. Not only was every single penny and everything I owned gone, I had been duped into dropping out of college and still owed money to the school. I paused for effect. Duped, I say. Duped. I emphasized with as much drama as I could muster. Katrina was not inclined to share my mirth. This isn't funny, she said. Oh, believe me, I know. I agreed more somberly. But after a while, and it's been so long, what can I do but laugh at my own foolishness? Anyway, I continued as if to answer myself, I moved out of there, like I said. I found a job and started rebuilding my life. I thought about pursuing her, trying to get my money back, but it just wasn't an option. Why not? Katrina asked, like anyone who hears the story does. I answered with a shrug before explaining, because she covered her tracks so well. No police or lawyers would get involved or take the case. I had signed documents, gone to court with her to transfer the annuities, and was just too entwined in the situation to pursue her. She had done it all in such a way that I would be implicating myself for serious fraud if I tried to expose her. She was smart, that woman. But you know what? Who needs credit anyway? I'm sure my treasure will return to me. That's what always happens in the stories. The good guy loses his fortune and lives penniless for a time. Then some magical opportunity comes by and bam, his fortune is returned. I finished with a grin. The end of the story, I had decided, was mine to tell as I wanted it to be. And I preferred happy endings, thank you very much. Katrina's smile finally grew and she laughed a little by the end. Sometimes when I think about the experiences we've had on this planet, so many people, it's been so hard for so many of you. When I think about it, sometimes I'm amazed at how we make it through. We do make it through, though, I said, more seriously now that I had broken the tension. She cured me of my obsession with wanting a mom, that's for sure. So it wasn't all bad. Your obsession with wanting a mom is a very natural human feeling, she answered. No matter how bad a mother is, We only ever get one. It's a strange bond and one that we can't help but be affected by. Well, I said, bitterness dripping from my every word. Thanks to my mommy issues, I let a woman take me for everything I was worth. I squandered my father's inheritance and gave up on my education. I ruined my life. Did you ruin your life? She repeated with emphasis on did. She did not believe that, and she knew I didn't either. I said, no, not really. I felt like I had at the time, though. I was lost, heartbroken, alone. I felt like I was nothing. Nothing except for anger and hope. Hope? She asked. Yeah, hope, I said. I knew this wasn't how my life would turn out. I wanted more. I've always wanted more. And goddamn her and her mind fuckery, I was going to claw my way out of the hole that she had left me in. That's the spirit, Katrina finally cheered. And that... Yikes, I'm so pissed. Okay, sorry. That concludes chapter 16 of my book, Finding Starlight. The true, unbelievably true story of my life as it really happened, being reviewed through the lens of a past life regression session. Super was not looking forward to reading that chapter, and now it's over, so yay. I will see you not this coming Wednesday because I'm in Dallas for a work thing, but the following Wednesday with chapter 17. Unless I get discovered by then. Somebody tell Ellen, Reese Witherspoon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Sam Stoloff at Francis Golden Literary Agency. Thank you so much for following along with me. I can see that hundreds of you are watching each week, and I don't know who you are, so please like it, follow my YouTube page, send me a comment, send me a DM, let me know who you are, and know that this means everything to me. I wrote this for you. I wrote this for all of us, so thank you. I love you, and I will see you very, very soon on the other side. Until then, bye-bye.